Hello and welcome to another video of this course. This is Module 8 and we're looking at environmental laws and protection energy. Under that, we're going to look at objectives of environmental law. We're going to look at types of environmental laws. We're going to look at principles of environmental laws and importance or purpose of environmental laws. So let's move into the introduction. Environmental law is a branch of law that encompasses regulations, principles, and agreements designed to protect the environment from harmful human activities. It governs how individuals, businesses, and governments interact with the natural world. Environmental law encompasses principles, policies, directives, and regulations enacted and enforced by local, national, or international entities to regulate human treatment of the non-human world. So we'll look at the objectives of environmental law. One, to protect human health from environmental harm, to regulate pollution, air, water, soil, and noise, to conserve natural resources and biodiversity, to ensure sustainable use of resources, to enforce international environmental treaties, to promote environmental justice and equity. What are the types of environmental law? They can be broadly categorized into several types based on their scope, function, and area of regulation. So we have command and control legislation. Most environmental laws fall into a general category of laws known as command and control. Such laws typically involve three elements. Number one, identification of the type of environmentally harmful activity, imposition of specific conditions and standards on that activity, and finally, prohibition of forms of the activity that fail to comply with imposed conditions and standards. The most obvious forms of regulated activity involve actual discharges of pollutants into the air, water, and environment. Number two, environmental assessment mandates. Environmental assessment mandates are another significant form of environmental law. Such mandates generally perform three functions. Number one, identification of the level of threshold of potential environmental impact at which a contemplated action is significant enough to require the preparation of an assessment. Two, establishment of specific goals for the assessment mandated. And three, setting of requirements to ensure that the assessment will be considered in determining whether to proceed with action as originally contemplated or to pursue an alternative action. Number three, economic incentives. The use of economic instruments to create incentives for environmental protection is a popular form of environmental law. Such incentives include pollution taxes, subsidies for clean technologies and practices, and the creation of markets in either environmental protection or pollution. We have set aside schemes. A final method of environmental protection is the setting aside of lands and waters in their natural state. In the US, for example, the vast majority of land owned by the federal government can be developed only with the approval of federal agency. Now let's look at principles of environmental law. The principles of environmental law are foundational legal and ethical guidelines that shape the interpretation, implementation, and development of environmental policies and legislation. These principles are recognized both in national legal systems and international environmental agreements. The first is the precautionary principle. Environmental law regularly operates in areas complicated by high levels of scientific uncertainty. In the case of many activities that entail some change to the environment, it is impossible to determine precisely what effects the activity will have on the quality of the environment or on human health. It is generally impossible to know, for example, whether a certain level of air pollution will result in an increase in mortality from respiratory disease, whether a certain level of water pollution will reduce a healthy fish population, or whether oil development in an environmentally sensitive area will significantly disturb the native wildlife. The precautionary principle requires that there is a strong suspicion that a certain activity may have environmentally harmful consequences. It is better to control that activity now rather than wait for incontrovertible scientific evidence. We have the prevention principle. Although much environmental legislation is drafted in response to catastrophes, preventing environmental harm is cheaper, easier, and less environmentally dangerous than reacting to environmental harm that already has taken place. The prevention principle is the fundamental notion behind laws regulating the generation, transportation, treatment, storage, and disposal of hazardous waste, and laws regulating the use of pesticides. We have the polluter pays principle. Since the early 1970s, the polluter pays principle has been a dominant concept in environmental law. Many economists claim that much environmental harm is caused by producers who externalize the cost of their activities. For example, factories that emit unfiltered exhaust into the atmosphere or discharge untreated chemicals into a river pay little to dispose of their waste. Instead, the cost of waste disposal in form of pollution is borne by the entire community. Accordingly, the purpose of many environmental regulations is to force polluters to bear the real cost of the pollution, though such costs are often difficult to calculate precisely. The next principle is the integration principle. Environmental protection requires that due consideration be given to potential consequences of environmentally fateful decisions. Various jurisdictions and business organizations have integrated environmental considerations into their decision-making processes through environmental impact assessment mandates and other provisions. Another principle is the public participation principles. Decisions about environmental protection often formally integrate with the views of the public. Generally, government decisions to set environmental standards for specific types of pollution, to permit significant environmentally damaging activities, or to preserve significant resources are made only after the intending decision has been formally and publicly announced, and the public has been given the opportunity to influence the decision through handwritten comments or hearings. Now let's look at sustainable development. Sustainable development is an approach to economic planning that attempts to foster economic growth while preserving the quality of the environment for future generations. Despite its enormous popularity in the last 2 decades of the 20th century, the concept of sustainable development proved difficult to apply in many cases, primarily because the result for long-term sustainability analysis depend on the particular resources focused upon. For example, a forest that will provide a sustained yield of timber in perpetuity may not support native bird populations, and the mineral deposit that will eventually be exhausted may nevertheless support more or less sustainable communities. Although tourism poses the threat of environmental harm for population and the overuse of natural resources, it also can create economic incentives for preservation of the environment in developing countries and increase awareness of unique and fragile ecosystems throughout the world. So let's look at the importance of environmental laws. They are designed to protect human health and the environment by regulating activities that could harm them. They prevent, minimize, and remedy environmental damage and ensure sustainable development. This is achieved through various means, including setting of standards for pollution, protecting natural resources, and holding individuals and organizations accountable for environmental damage. So these are some of the reasons. They establish standards for air and water quality, chemical safety, and waste management to minimize risk for human health. Environmental laws help protect biodiversity, manage resources like forests and fisheries, and promote sustainable practices. They regulate greenhouse gas emissions, promote renewable energy, and incentivize energy efficiency to mitigate climate change. Environmental laws set limits on pollution levels and require industries to implement measures to prevent and control pollution. They aim to protect vulnerable populations from disproportionate environmental burdens and promote equitable access to a healthy environment. Environmental laws establish liabilities for environmental change, environmental damage, requiring polluters to clean up contaminated areas and restore damaged ecosystems. They also encourage practices that meet current needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Thank you very much for watching this video. I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.